Mafah was a player who was growing on me during the season where I was starting to feel comfortable in considering him having in my top 10 depending on how he finished the season. So how did he finish the rest of the season? Well, hey y'all! For this video, we'll be continuing going through the 2025 running back prospects, and this time we have a star-studded list for this video, covering Omarion Hampton from UNC, Phil Mafah from Clemson, Quinshon Judkins from Ohio State, Quinton Cooley from Liberty, and Raheim Sanders from South Carolina. If you're new to these, my running back evals use some different grading methods, which if you want more details on these, you can check out part 1 of this series, which should be accessible to a link that should be on the screen now, as I have more details on how I grade my players in that. Also, if you want to check out my grades and evals of the running backs from last year for reference, you can check them out with the link that should be in the description. For any new viewers, I have evals and full scan reports out for Ashton Jeanty, Bashal Tuden, Cam Scadaboo, Damian Martinez, Devin Neal, DJ Giddens, Dylan Sampson, Jordan James, Caleb Johnson, Ollie Gordon II, and more, which you can check out on my channel. I'll be finishing up this series in the next few days, so to be sure you don't miss the finale of the series or any other future positional group series in the future, be sure to subscribe. Now let's first take a look at Hampton. Starting with Hampton's basic stats, despite starting quarterback Max Johnson being lost to injury in week 1 and the team's passing offense looking horrendous all season, Hampton still found a way to carry the offense at times, rushing for 1,660 yards and 15 touchdowns on 281 carries, which equals out to a yards per carry of 5.9, while also contributing a lot through the air by catching 38 receptions for 373 yards and 2 touchdowns. It was incredible to still see him be so efficient despite consistently facing heavy boxes. In his highlight games against North Carolina State, Wake Forest, Pittsburgh, and Duke, he rushed for at least 100 yards in all the highlight games and rushed for 100 yards in 10 of his 12 in 2024. Which again, when the offense knew they were going to be facing heavy doses of Hampton, that's extremely impressive that he could still force his will on teams. In the highlight games, he had at least 3 receptions in all of the games, and had at least 3 receptions in 10 of his 12 as well, including every single game in his final 9 games. Also, there's a number of backs that didn't often hit 20 touches a game, but Hampton hit that mark in 10 of his 12, hit 30 touches in 4 of his 12, and even went as high as 30 when the team really needed him in 3 of his 4. His workhorse ability to be able to help on the ground and in the air is extremely impressive, and again, the fact that he can do this without losing much efficiency really speaks to the level of talent athlete that he is. So to see how talented he is, let's take a look at some of his grades. For his contact balance and elusiveness, Hampton has such strong legs to keep moving through contact to almost guarantee that he always finishes his runs forward. He also has quick feet to help maintain his balance and typically runs with good pad level for his size. He has zero hesitation about taking contact and is a battering ram at times who could often find a way to get the job done in short yardage and congested situations. When he gets into open space, he has great curvilinear movement to be able to move around the field and defenders without losing much momentum or speed. Those movement skills combined with his good speed and great burst allow him to pick up yards very quickly. Also, he has good timing with his moves in open space to be able to make defenders miss. That being said, while he can make defenders miss, I do think at times he can be a bit uncreative in space. He's often too willing to just try to take on contact as a rusher, or simply just try to outrun the defenders, and needs to get more creative in space and with his blocks. This will especially be important in the NFL as he has good acceleration, but lacks great speed to be able to outrun defenders like he did in college, and will only have those gaps get closer more in the NFL. I'd also like to see him have a bit more self-preservation and not leave his feet as unnecessarily as he did. Those plays are definitely fun to watch, but there will be a lot more of a headache for NFL coaches if he ends up getting himself unnecessarily injured. As far as safe tackles he can work to avoid, he can also work to try to avoid the number of ankle tackles that he was taken down by, as he can do a better job using high knees and anticipating these tackles to avoid them. So not surprisingly, but Hampton earned an A- for his contact balance. For his elusiveness, he earned a B, which is very good for a back of his style and size. For his receiving and pass blocking, he's also a very capable pass catcher who catches the ball with good hand technique with only 2 drops and 80 career targets. It's a little thing, but he's so quick at getting his hands on the ball when it's away from his frame and quickly securing the ball. Once he has the ball secured, he has a really smooth transition to move upfield despite his bigger stature. As a pass blocker, he shows a lot of good promise and solid results at this time. He's very good at identifying his assignment, and even if it's a delayed blitz across the formation. He also does a good job of getting square to his target and delivering a good punch with his initial pop. Also uses his good strength to be able to maintain his block and his active feet to keep up with them while they try to get off him. Now, while he's a reliable pass catcher, I would like to see him expand his impact in the passing game. He is great at going out for dump off and screen routes, but he routinely wasn't asked to do too much past that. I think he has the hands and the movement skills to be able to have more of an impact, so I'd like to see him prove that he's capable more in the NFL. Also, as a pass blocker, while he mostly has good fundamentals, his base can sometimes get a bit narrow at times and his feet can be a bit delayed in their movements, leading to him losing his block. Also, he needs to work to be a little less trigger happy, as he often wants to deliver a hard hit in pass pro, but will have too many times where he just lunges and loses balance, leading to a missed block. So for his receiving, Hampton earned a B+. For his pass blocking, he also earned an impressive B. For his vision and ball handling, well, he has some vision issues that we'll get into in a little bit. He does do a good job hugging his blocks to shorten the distance that he has to travel and get the most out of his blocks. However, his vision is the most noticeable deficit in his game, and one that will need further refining. He tends to play at 1 speed, which is great if a hole is there and ready for him. However, he doesn't often allow for openings to open up and often rushes in congested areas. When openings do open up, he can be a bit delayed in recognizing holes that are briefly open and can miss cutback lanes. In general, he also makes things a bit more difficult than they have to be with some questionable lane decisions and poor reads of his blocked leverage. So though he ran more in zone schemes last season, I think he may be better suited for a gap scheme that streamlines things a bit more for him. However, he did do a good job protecting the ball and had just 1 fumble on slightly over 300 touches this last year. So with his first blemish on a great set of grades, Hampton earned just a C for his vision. However, he bounced back real quick with an A- for his ball handling. For his future role in athleticism, there isn't a lot Hampton can't do. He's an incredible rusher with a great blend of size, power, movement skills, and athleticism. Which, speaking of that, I feel I saw a number of people disappointed with Hampton's combine performance, which I just think it's kind of funny when I look at his 9.62 RASP result. I personally felt his results were about as expected, maybe even better than I expected at his size. But again, just really shows the type of athlete he is. Not only can Hampton carry the load on the ground, but he's also a very good and reliable pass catcher. He also holds up well in pass blocking and could become a great pass blocker with just a little bit of NFL coaching. Really the only thing that concerns me is his vision, but again, if he goes to a team that has more of a heavy gap scheme, then that basically becomes a non-issue. So with not a lot of holes in his games as the rest of his grades indicate, Hampton earned a B+ for his future role grade. Also with great athleticism and having it at his size, he easily earned a green flag. For a summary of his strengths, I can't speak enough about the effort that he puts on the field every play. With the heavy workload he regularly had and the team underperforming due to quarterback play, he could have asked to be subbed out and take it easy to protect his health and draft stock. However, he instead gave 100% of his effort to play every single down and played like it was his last going through defenders with his contact balance. Also, he isn't just a battering ram as he has smooth movements to change his course in space and is a regular contributor as a pass catcher. He's also a regular contributor as a pass blocker and could become one of the league's best pass blockers with the right focus and coaching. While Hampton is a regular contributor in the passing games, his contributions are often limited around the line of scrimmage. I really like to see him get more work down the field and show off more potential as a pass catcher. I always like to see him see the field and blocks a little bit better. He often misreads his blocks and will rush things before his blocks can develop. He should also work to not only be more creative in space, but also to work to protect himself instead of just throwing his body at defenders. On that note, I think he does need to work on finding the right balance between playing aggressive but in control, since he can have that go away both as a runner and as a blocker at times. So by taking the average of all his grades, Hampton earned a 3.14 out of 4, which puts him in my good starter tier. As much as I really like a lot of what Hampton does and the energy that he brings to the position, there is a lot of nuance he still needs to work out. He has the athleticism, size, and physicality you want at the position, but hasn't shown enough progress in his vision and feel with the ball in his hands to get me excited about him as I would like to. That being said, while he hasn't shown that progression yet, he will be going to NFL level coaching that may be the thing to be able to finally push him past the plateau that he's at and turn him into a special player that he's capable of becoming. Due to both players having a lot of physicality and athleticism you want from the position, but lacking the nuance, I have Ronnie Brown as Hampton's comp. Both Brown and Hampton have zero fear about taking contact, but both can sometimes invite it a little bit too much. Both can also have questionable vision at times, but also have the athleticism to make up for those deficits. Also, both are capable pass catchers on tough offense screens, but may not be as effective at running routes from a receiver spot. Like Brown, I could see Hampton feasting the right scheme and the right coaching staff. I think at worst he could be a player who flashes with some moments of frustration. The big question will be is if those flashes will shine enough to be able to overshadow his misses and keep him on the field. Moving to our next back, Phil Mafah from Clemson. If we look at Mafah's season statistics in a vacuum, they look pretty good with 1,115 yards and 18 touchdowns on the ground on 216 carries for a yards per carry of 5.2. His receiving protection doesn't look quite as good with just 103 yards and no touchdowns, but 21 receptions is at least encouraging. Mafah was a player who was growing on me during the season where I was starting to feel comfortable in considering him having in my top 10 depending on how he finished the season. So how did he finish the rest of the season? Well, really poorly, unfortunately. He looked like such a more timid and error-prone version of himself that made me so confused of what the heck was happening. For reference, in his first 9 games, he averaged 6.1 yards per carry, which is extremely impressive. His final 5 games, though, just 2.4 yards per carry, so nearly a third of what he was doing before. I mentioned in my midseason rankings video that I was a bit concerned Mafah was benefiting against lesser competition, and with how poorly he ended the season, that does add some validity to that. We can see some of that limited production against quality opponents in his highlight games here against SMU, South Carolina, Louisville, and Georgia, with Louisville being his only one good game, which to his credit was a great performance, but still just really disappointing performances against the rest. Also, he struggled with ball security in 2023, but started out the year doing a great job protecting the ball. Unfortunately, he also began to lose the ball and had 2 fumbles in his final 5 games. So Mafah is a really weird case after looking at a lot of his stats and how he changed at the midway point, but I think it's a little bit easier to understand what type of player he is by going through some of his grades. For his contact balance and elusiveness, at 6'1", 234 pounds, he's one of the bulkiest backs in his class, which gives him good potential to be a bruiser and hold up against hits. He does a good job keeping his legs moving to help pick up extra yards at his size. He also does a good job keeping his momentum forward while making moves and adjusting his direction to not lose much momentum. When he is making moves, he has some good timing to give him a chance to avoid or at least minimize contact. However, he can sometimes have trouble making moves due to needing a fair amount of extra steps and effort to be able to quickly change his direction, which gives it an opening for the defender to take him down. Speaking of being able to take him down, it was really disappointing to see how many times he was taken down by the first defender. As I mentioned, he has great size, so you'd expect a player who can routinely break tackles or even take a defender for a ride. Unfortunately, Mafah often played smaller than his size, and would likely surprise most people who watch him that he actually weighs 234 pounds. A big part of the issue is that his pad level just got a lot worse this year. That ruined a lot of the leverage and drive he could generate and made it easier for defenders to at least stonewall him to prevent additional yards. He can also help himself by picking up extra yards by adjusting his body before contact more consistently to try to minimize contact and keep himself upright. It's really important that he gets his contact balance to return to form because he has very limited ability to be able to make defenders miss in space with his lack of twitch, so he's going to have to rely on that bulk in that body. So with a really disappointing start, Mafah earned just a C+ for his contact balance, which is a big bummer with how big of a frame he has. Also, he earned just a C- for his elusiveness. For his receiving and pass blocking, though Will Shipley left for the NFL, Mafah had similar involvement in the passing game this season compared to last year, but at least generally caught the ball with good hand technique when the ball was placed on his frame. He also had surprisingly good transition upfield and after making the catch. As a blocker, he generally has good identification skills and typically will use his hands in pass protection. However, with his lack of athleticism and stiffness, he'll likely continue to be limited to screen passes and swing passes in the NFL. Also, struggles catching the ball away from his frames don't give me confidence that he can expand past that. It seems Clemson also wasn't overly confident in his receiving ability, as his production in the receiving game didn't take a step forward despite the departure of Shipley. The team also seemed nervous at times trusting him as a pass blocker, as he often has struggles in this area as well. He has a bad habit of lunging and ducking too frequently, which leads to a high number of misses. When he isn't lunging, he's often too passive, which lets the defender make the first move and often get around him. Also, while he typically uses his hands, he often has poor timing, which again leads the defender to be able to get around him and avoid his punch altogether. So the hits unfortunately keep coming for Mafah, as he earned just a C+ for his receiving, and can't break out of the C's with a C for his pass blocking. For his vision and ball handling, he has a lot of experience and confidence running in both gap and zone runs. He has a good eye for leverage of his blocks and does a good job navigating traffic on inside runs. He's a patient runner who does a good job waiting for an opening and keeping an eye out for cutback lanes. While he is a patient runner, at times he can be a bit indecisive when trying to find a hole and could use a bit more tempo in his runs. Also, he can work to consistently hug his blocks more frequently to be able to help further compensate for his lack of speed and burst. Also, Mafah had a season fumble rate of 1 every 119 touches, but if we just based off his final 5 games, that'd be 1 fumble every 32 touches. So he might fall somewhere more in the middle of that, but it still isn't a great mark and something he needs to improve. Alright, so we finally got our very first positive grades for Mafah, as he earned a B+ for his vision. And though things did come down to earth a little bit, he still earned a B- for his ball handling. For his future role in athleticism or RAS, Mafah likely fits more as a 2-down back, since he doesn't bring much to the passing game other than reliable hands around the line of scrimmage. I know that doesn't exactly paint a high ceiling for him, but he does have the vision and size to potentially get that type of role. The big thing for him was to play to his size and use better pad level to get more consistent drive and break tackles. He needs to do this since he isn't able to make defenders miss in open space. Also, while Mafah didn't do any combine testing, and we have to speculate at this time, I would expect that he's likely an average athlete at the very best, as his film shows a lack of top speed and a slow accelerator. So Mafah being limited to being an early down back and questions of how well he can even do that, he earned just a C- for his future role. Also, though I'm speculating since we don't have athletic testing to know for sure, I do really believe that Mafah would deserve a red flag for his athleticism or RAS. For a summary of his strengths, he has really good vision that he can leverage to compensate for his lack of speed and find the most optimal route. And while he isn't the most dynamic pass catcher, he does have reliable hands when the ball is thrown on his frame. Finally, he has some great size and strength to be a bruiser if he makes some adjustments to be able to optimize his ability. Now that adjustment he needs to make though is his pad level. It was really rough this year and led to way too many times when he was taken down by the first tackler for his size. Also, while he can catch the ball, he hasn't been overly productive, which does beg the question of how much he can be trusted in the NFL. Also, maybe questionable about how often he can be trusted in pass protection as well, due to the high number of lunges and whiffs he takes. Finally, he's just very athletically limited with poor change of direction ability and has a lot of trouble trying to make defenders miss in open space. So by taking the average of all his grades, Mafah earned a 2.29 out of 4, which puts him in my needs improvement to contribute tier. This is a low overall grade that may be surprising to people, but Mafah's calling card is supposed to be his contact balance, and that worsening this year, it's just really hard for me to get excited about him. His vision is still star quality, but backs ultimately need a baseline of athleticism to be able to execute what they see, and I'm just not certain Mafah can do that. On top of that, he isn't able to produce much in the passing game, and unsurprisingly has trouble making defenders miss in space. So it's just hard to see what he can provide to a team that another back on the roster can't provide. As for a comp, I have another back who had some fans when he was in his draft cycle but ultimately struggled to hold on to a role, Benny Snell. Both Snell and Mafah have big builds that give them the potential to be bruisers in the NFL. Both also have very good vision that helps them find openings and ways to be able to beat the defense despite their limited athleticism. However, that lack of athleticism causes a lot of limitations in their ability to pick up chunk yards and make defenders miss. Also, they aren't the most productive pass catchers and have improvements to make as pass blockers. Snell was eventually phased out for backs that offer more upside, and I have concerns that Mafah could run into similar issues. If he improves his pad level, I think he has a better chance of getting a role with the team. However, he still needs to work to be more well-rounded to overcome his athletic limitations. Moving on to our next back, we have another big-time name, Quinshon Judkins from Ohio State. After having an incredible breakout season as a freshman when he ran for 1,567 yards and 16 touchdowns as a true freshman in the SEC, Judkins has seen a production dip every year. For 2024, there was at least an understandable reason as he was splitting time with Travion Henderson, who is also a very talented back. So while his production isn't impressive on paper, knowing that he rushed for 1,060 yards and 14 touchdowns on 194 carries, which equals out to yards per carry of 5.5, while splitting time is very impressive. His receiving production wasn't that impressive, but again, Henderson taking a piece of that pie affected this as well. That timeshare also impacted how each did in their games, as there weren't too many times when they both went off together and had a good game, other than the rematch against Oregon, but everyone in Ohio State had a great game that time. Either way, Judkins does take a bit more of a nuanced approach to be able to evaluate him, since his box scores don't exactly align with top running back prospects. So let's jump into the grades for him. For his contact balance and elusiveness, he runs a great pad level and consistently keeps his legs moving through contact. While he isn't afraid to head towards contact, he's smart with the way he can get defenders off balance to make it easier to shed. He also makes defenders miss thanks to having really good timing and efficiency with his feet when he's making moves. His quick feet also show as he can quickly plan and burst through a cutback lane. That burst gives him a lot of potential as a one-cut runner in the NFL. Outside of his ability to burst off his cuts, he also has really great curvilinear movement that helps him maintain his speed in the open field and maintain the distance between him and trailing defenders. While he has some cuts and nice moves he can make in open field, he doesn't always have that twitch to cleanly avoid defenders. In general, while it still is a strength of his, he did seem to have a harder time cleanly shedding tackles compared to previous seasons, with fewer forced missed tackles per rush attempt this year compared to previous years. I think part of the issue is that sometimes he just wasn't as confident running behind the Ohio State offensive line, as he had a few more questionable decisions with his vision this year compared to previous seasons. I also think needing to split time with Henderson also impacted him getting into a rhythm, but will need to be something that he establishes quicker to not be at risk of losing touches in the NFL. Also, while his contact balance is good, he isn't always able to generate enough drive to finish all the short yardage plays that he got. So Judkins ends up earning a B+ for his contact balance and a B for his elusiveness. For his receiving and pass blocking, while he's still developing as a pass catcher, he does show some good hand technique and generally has reliable hands when the ball is on his frame. He even shows some potential of advanced knowledge as a pass catcher with the way he can trail with the quarterback when they break the pocket and find openings in the coverage. He had a great example of this against Notre Dame in the national championship game, and does a few times during the regular season as well. He's also still growing as a pass blocker, but he doesn't seem afraid of contact and will often set a good base for his block. His fearlessness also shines as a blocker when he's asked to be a lead blocker in a QB or receiver run, when he's giving maximum effort in his block. So the effort he gives is great, but there are still times when I want a little bit more, especially in the pass game. He can be a bit slow to identify his assignment in pass pro situations, leading to some sloppy, inefficient lunges or dives. Also, though he often sets a good base, he often lacks great timing with his hip roll to get good pop to stonewall his target. All that leads to a player who does give good effort as a blocker, but often can only slow down his assignment and not stop him. Also needs to work to be able to do a little bit more than expected in the passing game. As I mentioned, he has reliable hands when the ball is on his frame. However, when it's away from his frame, his hand technique and strength can get a little bit shaky, leading to some missed opportunities. Also, he seems to have a little bit of a hitch in his transition from receiver to rusher, likely due to just being inexperienced as a pass catcher. So at the very least, I think that is something that could improve, but he needs those opportunities and practice reps. Right now, I just don't really feel comfortable with him being involved in more than just dump off and screen pass in the NFL, and I kind of expect NFL teams to feel the same. So Judkins ended up earning just a B- for receiving, and just a C+ for his pass blocking. For his vision and ball handling, he has some of the best vision in this class with a great eye for leverage and cutback lanes. He also has really good tempo to his runs and a good balance of patience to let his blockers develop to clear a path without being too patient and missing tight holes. When he does identify a hole that's quickly closing, he does a great job getting skinny through it to be able to still pick up a positive gain. In general, he's one of the best in the class at hugging his blocks to maximize his blockers' efforts. He can also maximize their efforts downfield as he's very comfortable setting up blocks at the second level. Also, it's clear that he has an understanding of when to follow his blocks and when to break off course and get creative. When he does get creative, he's great at turning lemons into lemonade even when defenders get through the line of scrimmage. All that combined with a lot of experience in both zone and gap schemes make him one of the most well-rounded and safe runners in the class. There were definitely some questionable decisions as a rusher that he made, but again, I think some of that had to do with just him not being in a rhythm and lacking synergy with the offensive line. Also, he did a good job holding onto the ball, with just a single fumble on the year on his 216 touches. So with easily his best grade so far, Judkins earns A- for his vision and ball handling. For his future role in athleticism or RAS, he surprised a lot of people, including myself, with his combine performance. Now, I think I expected a little bit better than what other people thought, but I expected just a solid performance. But he came to make an impression and had one of the better workouts of the running back group as a whole. The athleticism shows on every play in his movement skill and explosiveness in his cuts. Also, he does a good job pairing that athleticism with his vision and contact balance to at the very least have a great floor as a rusher. What he can do past that, though, is a bit questionable. He isn't a liability as a pass catcher or blocker, but they certainly aren't strength of his. Honestly, I don't know if they will ever be, and I think Ohio State having success while using Henderson in a lot of those situations may make teams think kind of the same way is the best way to be able to use Judkins and keep him on the sidelines for passing downs. So due to still having a great floor as a rusher, Judkins earned a B for his future role grade. Also, thanks to his impressive combine performance, he earned a green flag. For a summary of his strengths, Judkins has some of, if not the best vision in the class. He can find openings, set up blocks, and is just so creative and deadly in open space. He has quick feet to help him in his movements and give him a chance to be able to make defenders miss. Between the tackles, he has great burst to operate as a one-cut runner and blow through a closing hole. He also runs with impressive pad level to help pick up extra yards, and at the minimum finish his runs falling forward. While he can still break tackles, his rate of tackle breaking did drop this year and could be a concern if that continues to be an ongoing issue. Also, he doesn't have the frame or drive to consistently finish short yardage runs, which may limit his opportunities in the red zone. His ability to help on passing down is also questionable, as he isn't able to provide much above expected as a pass catcher and has a fair amount of lapses as a blocker. Finally, while he tested great at the combine, he does lack great top speed needed to race past the defender, which can be crucial for backs who may not play every single down. So by taking the average of all his grades, Judkins earned a 3.05 out of 4, but puts him in my good starter tier. While I do still like Judkins and I think he's a very safe player, I think he's going to be one of the many casualties of this deep running back class and could be at risk falling further in the draft than people expect. If he slides, I do think a team will get good value, but how much they're willing to use him on all downs will be interesting to monitor. As he is now, I feel confident trusting him on early downs and even around the red zone, despite some of his struggles finishing in short yard situations thanks to his fantastic vision. However, if he can continue to take steps forward as a pass catcher, we could see a really fun player on our hands. As for a comp, I have J.K. Dobbins as Judkins' comp. It might be hard to envision how well this comp would work since Dobbins has been battling injuries so much of his career. However, both Dobbins and Judkins have great vision to pair with great contact balance and timing with their moves to shake off defenders. Both are also great at setting up their blocks and have the creativity to make the most out of broken plays. Neither are known for their passing game contributions, but aren't liabilities in their roles if they aren't pushed too far. We got a taste of what Dobbins is capable of when he was healthy this past year, and I'm hoping Judkins can do much of the same if he does go to the right team with the right vision for him. Next for our next back who has the coolest name in the draft, Quinton Cooley from Liberty. Sorry, trying to get ready for our daughter and prepping some dad jokes here. But Cooley has one of the most simple stat lines with 205 carries, but just a single reception in 2024. That's pretty impressive, honestly. Usually there's backs with like 6, 8 catches on the year, but this might be the first time we've seen a player with the volume that Cooley had just have one single reception. Regardless, he did basically all his damage on the ground, rushing for 1,254 yards and 13 touchdowns for a yards per carry of 6.1. Cooley had consistent production in the highlighted games against Sam Houston, Western Kentucky, Jacksonville State, and FIU, as he rushed for at least 90 yards in each game. And he even got that one reception against Jacksonville State. But anyways, I'm just going to keep this section brief and just move to the grades since I think we can only talk so much about how he only had rushing stats. For his contact balance and elusiveness, though he's small, he's still able to find a way to typically fall forward on his runs, thanks to always keeping his legs chugging. His smaller size definitely helps, but he runs with very good pad level to further help get him extra yards. That being said, I am concerned about his contact balance and how he'll stand up in the NFL, since he already sometimes struggles to cleanly break tackles against lower competition that he faced. Also, he often needs a fair amount of extra steps when making quick changes in direction, which gave the defense enough time to stop him. So Cooley ended up earning just a C+ for his contact balance and C- for his elusiveness. For his receiving and pass blocking, despite being a smaller player, he's a very willing blocker and gives good effort having active feet to try to keep up with his block. It's very easy for me to complete his grading for his rushing and pass blocking sections, but it's much harder to evaluate his pass catching skills. Already had a bit of a hard time finding liberty gains, and finding games that Cooley actually had a reception in was even harder. That being said, in the very few instances I was able to see him make a reception, he did show good hand technique to make the catch. Now, the reason I had such a hard time finding clips of Cooley making a reception is that he only has 11 career receptions in 4 seasons, despite getting sufficient usage in most of those seasons. It's probably obvious, but that's an extremely low total, and a lot of backup tight ends and running backs are clearing that in just a single season. So though he looked decent in very few opportunities, it's risky to trust that he can suddenly handle more volume in the NFL. Also, his inexperience shows in his transition from pass catcher to rusher, as it can be a bit stiff when he needs to focus on securing the ball. That seemed like an experience issue, but again, something that he does need to practice more to be able to clean up. His lack of experience also showed in his route running, as they are often very sloppy with very rounded cuts. Also, he will move with the quarterback when they scramble, but has trouble finding open space and will often get lost. As a pass blocker, his size will likely always be a limiting factor, and he'll likely continue to have inconsistent success. He can potentially have more success if he does have better hand use, as he'll either have poor timing with some of his punches, or will just lead with his shoulder when he wants to try to give a bigger hit. In general, I think he needs to stay a bit calmer, as he can sometimes get too excited, leading him to leave his feet and losing his balance. I'd also like to see him be a bit calmer sometimes as a rusher, as he can sometimes get a bit too hasty and run into his blockers. So Cooley earned just a C- for receiving and a C for his pass blocking. For his vision and ball handling, he has very good vision, which was crucial to his success. A lot of small school backs either run a high volume with just gap or zone runs, however Cooley ran a good mix of both and looked good in both types. He's a patient runner with enough urgency to know when to break upfield to ensure the offense still gets a gain on the play. Also, he has a good eye for cutback lanes and has just enough burst to get some solid gains when there's an opening. Between the tackles, he's comfortable reading his blocks and consistently hugs his blocks. However, I do think that sometimes he can lose his focus in a second level and not set up his blocks as well. So Cooley finally broke out of the C's and earned a B+ for his vision and a B- for his ball handling. For his future role in athleticism, his best bet is going to be an early down back with his limited experience as a pass catcher. At the very least, he does have the vision that should translate to the NFL and is needed to be a 2-down back. However, it's going to be a major uphill battle to get playing time and honestly, just to get a roster spot at this rate. His size could already cross him off some teams' lists, and his mental experience as a pass catcher will likely be a deterrent for a lot of teams as well. Finally, you pair that with clunky, slow accelerating movement skills, and it's just hard to see a team be willing to go after him and give him some playing time. So after a good stretch, Cooley crashed down back to earth, getting a D+ for his future role, and a red flag for his athleticism or RAS. For a summary of his strengths, he has good vision in both gap and zone runs to fit into most teams' run game plan. Also, he has great downhill mentality that helps him finish runs running forward despite his size. Also, despite his limited experience as a pass catcher, he caught the ball with good hand technique and was also very active and willing pass blocker. Though he has good vision, he can get a bit too excited and run into his blocks. Also, while he ran with good contact balance, it's questionable if it'll translate to the NFL with the increase in competition and his smaller size. If it doesn't translate, he will be in trouble since he's too stiff and isn't able to make defenders miss an open space. Also, he's just very limited on passing downs, both from past experience as a pass catcher and from ability to hold up against blocks that will likely cause him to not see any passing downs in the NFL. So by taking the average of all his grades, Cooley earned just a 2.14 out of 4, which puts him in my unlikely to contribute tier. Unfortunately, I think the size, athleticism, and lack of third down ability will make Cooley a hard sell to any team, and I'd be surprised if he gets drafted. He may need to just focus his efforts on special teams, but he could have a good chance to make an impact there if his effort as a rusher and blocker carry over. I know that sounds mean to say that a guy can't make it at his true position, however there just aren't a lot of successful 5'7" backs in the NFL who don't have great speed or pass catching ability. As for a comp, he's a bit bigger than him, but I do have Ryan Williams as Cooley's comp. Despite Williams being a bit taller, they are both short, compact running backs who have solid contact balance and can get some yards after contact thanks to their effort and strong legs. Also, both have good vision that help them overcome their physical limitations, but that being said, those physical limitations will make it hard for them to be successful, and their lack of contributions in the passing game makes their situation even more bleak. Williams dealt with injuries that derailed his career, but he wasn't off to a great start. I think just getting an opportunity to have any kind of start or playing time would be the next big step for Cooley after he tries to secure a roster spot. Again, maybe he can carve out a role as a running back, but I think more than likely he needs to focus his efforts and see how he can help on special teams. Moving to our final back of this group, we have Raheim "Rocket" Sanders from South Carolina. Starting with his basic stats, Sanders was a bit of a mixed bag. His raw numbers of 881 rushing yards and 11 touchdowns and 183 carries for a yards per carry of 4.8 isn't exactly inspiring. However, he did show some big playability as a pass catcher, making 27 receptions for 316 yards and 2 touchdowns. Also, though his season totals weren't great, some of his highlighted games were really impressive, including against Texas A&M, which may have been his best game of his career as he rushed for 144 yards and 2 touchdowns on 20 carries and still made 5 receptions for 92 yards. However, his Clemson game was really disappointing as a rusher with just 60 yards and 18 carries. A big reason for the fluctuating success Sanders had was his poor offensive line. He went from a bad offensive line at Arkansas to a bad one at South Carolina, so kind of bad planning on his part. However, he again really impressed with 48 receiving yards in that game. That was the big thing that really shifted for Sanders in South Carolina's offense. He wasn't very involved in the passing game for the first 5 games of the season, but for the final 7 games, he finished with 23 catches for 284 yards and 2 touchdowns. That is really impressive and a big reason why I became a big fan of Sanders a couple years when he was at Arkansas. Unfortunately, what also changed around that time was he started to fumble the ball more, as he had 3 fumbles in his final 5 games. Which struggles with fumbles aren't a new thing for him, so it is concerning that he's continuing to have this issue. But to find out how concerning that is and see how he performed overall, let's take a look at some of his grades. For his contact balance and elusiveness, he has very good size and runs with great pad level. He also does a great job keeping his legs moving and has the power to push piles. When he is playing physically and healthy, he's really tough to bring down. That difficulty to be taken down was needed this year as he switched schools, but still was behind an offensive line that struggled to create holes for him. As I mentioned, his offensive line didn't do him any favors on most plays, as he often had to make the most out of small or even no holes that were opened up by his offensive line, which led to 76.62% of his total rushing yards coming after contact. While he mostly pushed through tackles with power and wasn't always able to make defenders miss consistently, he does at least have quick feet for his size to give a chance to be able to make defenders miss around the line of scrimmage. Also, he knows how to adjust his course when he's out in the second level just to make them off balance. However, like a lot of bigger backs, with great power comes great disappointment and elusiveness. Sanders just really lacks the ability and creativity to make defenders miss in open space, and often just settles trying to go through them. When he does try to make defenders miss, he'll often be a tick slow with his move, and they can often be a bit too slow developing, leading to them being able to make contact before he finishes the move. Also, he can try to do a better job adjusting his body to help him more easily slide off tackles. So Sanders had a great start with a B+ for his contact balance, but unfortunately followed up with a C- for his elusiveness. For receiving and pass blocking, he can be a playmaker as a pass catcher with good, reliable hands and a good transition upfield despite his bigger size. He also does a great job becoming a freight train once he gets going and can plow through secondary defenders. Finally, while he has room to grow as a pass blocker, typically does a good job using his hands as a blocker. That being said, he didn't run routes deeper down the field and was mostly limited to routes and passes around the line of scrimmage. He can also have some lapses in concentration when needing to catch the ball away from his body. As I mentioned before, he also has a lot of work to improve as a pass blocker. He often struggles to identify his assignment, which often leads to a rough start. Also, despite his size, his anchor is pretty disappointing in part due to being an upright blocker. He can sometimes lunge too frequently as well and often has a poor base, which further limits his success rate in slowing down his target. So, kind of rinse and repeat, Sanders ended up with a B+ for his first grade for receiving, and then a C- for his second grade of pass blocking. For his vision and ball handling, in the past he could sometimes get tied up with being too patient. However, this year he did a much better job balancing patience and urgency. He runs with great tempo and has a good eye for cutback lanes, and he also does a good job of hugging his blocks and getting skinny through tight creases. He also has a great eye to be able to read the leverage of his blocks to know what openings are being created and which ones are closing very quickly. With the limited number of openings he had all year, it was a really impressive number of times he could correctly identify the most optimal path he should take to get the most yards. When he does see an opening, he often also has enough burst and top speed to give him a chance to still be able to contribute as a playmaker. However, I would like to see him improve his vision downfield. He can sometimes misread his blocks downfield and bounces runs outside, but ends up putting himself into a bad situation and losing out on potential yards. Also, he really needs to be careful with fumbles as he continues to struggle with them, and NFL coaches may just be less patient with him and his errors. So with his improved vision, Sanders earned an A- for his vision. Unfortunately, he did not improve his ball security and earned just a C. For his future role in athleticism or RAS, it's pretty easy to build a case why Sanders can be a contributor to an NFL offense. He has good size, strength, and contact balance to help in the red zone. He also has great athleticism and vision to be able to break off big gains. He also even has good hands and can make plays after the catch. Really the biggest question marks for him is, can he improve as a pass blocker, can he hold onto the ball, and can he stay healthy? He struggled with injuries in the past, including 2024, and missing time due to injury is the fastest way to be phased out of an offense, as is turning over the ball as frequently as he sometimes can. So while he has a pretty good skill set to be able to be successful, he still has some pretty big red flags he needs to work past. So with a lot to like about Sanders, he ended up earning a B for future role, as well as a green flag for his athleticism or RAS. As a summary of his strengths, Sanders is a patient runner who brings good nuance and also has a good balance between patience and urgency. He also has great contact balance, but he also has quick feet that lets him make the most out of bad opportunities. Add in his reliable hands and playmaking as a receiver, and you have a player with a lot of traits that could translate to NFL success. However, Sanders has a lot of traits that are also big red flags for him. He has struggled with injuries a lot these past few years, and he's also struggled with fumbles and hasn't shown any progression in protecting the ball at a better rate. In addition to those, he also just isn't that creative in open space and lacks the elusiveness to consistently make defenders miss. Also, his pass blocking is rough, which is disappointing since he does have the size to be a very good pass blocker, and that could cost him the opportunity to be in on passing downs if he doesn't improve as a blocker. So by taking the average of all his grades, Sanders earned a 2.67 out of 4, but puts him in my may have a future role tier. I admittedly have been a big fan of Sanders, but he does have limitations that are hard to defend, as I feel like I always have to prepare a case of why he wasn't successful as he should have been. While his one top speed, size, and pass catching ability is appealing, he often isn't able to deliver on all those together. He can also still be a bit too hesitant to get the top speed and deliver on big gains. He often plays too small in pass protection, and he also often struggles to get more involved in passes that aren't just screen or swing passes. While he may be a good goal line back and situational back, he needs to work to at least get more aggressive and reliable as a pass protector as well to give him a chance to be a more regular contributor. Then you add in the injury and fumble issues, and it does get trickier and trickier to trust him succeed in the NFL. As for a comp, I have Quinshon Judkins as Sanders' comp. Both Johnson and Sanders are bigger backs with good top speed but struggle with hesitation which can limit their ability to hit that speed. They both also have good vision and contact balance to help guarantee positive yards on most runs. Also, both are very capable pass catchers but are often not as great as pass blocking, which could limit how much they are used in those situations. Also, both have a lot of trouble making defenders miss in the open field, which could cap their upside. Finally, they both also struggle with ball security, which could be another reason they could lose snaps. Johnson had his career derailed due to injuries, but I thought he was at least on his way to being a solid contributor for the Lions. Sanders could miss out on opportunities as well with his injury history, or could just continue to struggle with fumbles and be benched. However, he could also be a reliable contributor early on if he does go to the right situation, stay healthy, and holds on to the ball. So big range of outcomes for him. And that's all for this set of backs. Let me know what your thoughts are on all the backs in the comments and who you think I'm too high and too low on. This is now part 6 of 7, so there's just one more part of the series which feels crazy that we're already here. But to be sure you don't miss the final part of this or any other future positional series, be sure to subscribe. While you're at it, like the videos, it would help the series and channel grow thanks to you. And if you want just the info on the evals, you can subscribe to my Substack as I'll have the full range evals for each player out at the same time as the video. But thank you all and see you all next time.